Romeo 151, I need an ambulance. Got a female in the back. She's unconscious and there's blood everywhere, mate.
In the early hours of August 21st, 2022, officers were called to a quiet street in Liverpool where neighbours had reported gunshots and screams. When they arrived, 28-year-old Ashley Dale was lying in a back garden suffering from a catastrophic gunshot wound. She'd been alone, in her home, in her pyjamas, just settling down for what should have been an ordinary night. But minutes earlier, a gunman had kicked in her front door and opened a fire, chasing her through her house as she just tried to escape. She never stood a chance. Despite being rushed to hospital, Ashley sadly died from her injuries, and as the investigation unfolded, a devastating truth emerged. Ashley Dale was never even the intended target. Hi guys, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. The case of Ashley Dale is one that literally set the nation on fire, because the reality is this is a beautiful young woman whose life was cut short in the most unimaginably evil way. I mean, she was literally executed in her own home. And we in the UK don't have guns. It's not something that we have some kind of constitutional right over. We do have people who can acquire guns legally and are allowed to hold them legally, but for the most part, it just isn't commonplace in the UK. And though we know that the criminal underworld certainly do have arms, it tends to remain in that area. So if you are somebody who happens to run with gangs, deal drugs, is literally involved in that subculture, then understandably, that's probably more commonplace for you. But for people like me, people like Ashley Dale even, the idea of somebody breaking into your home and murdering you is just something that you harbour in your fears in the back of your mind for occasional moments of anxiety when you lie in bed at night. You don't really think anything's going to play out in your own world that way. And Ashley Dale was not involved in a criminal underworld. I'm not saying that people that she was associated with were not involved. But like I said, it seems bizarre that this beautiful young woman, this educated, capable, absolutely adored young woman, ends up being the centre in the story I'm going to tell you today. Ashley Dale was this strikingly glamorous young woman. She was born on the 21st of December in 1993. Her parents were Julie and Stephen. Julie was young. She was 16 years of age when she had Ashley. And let's be clear, there's a hell of a lot of stress associated with having kids at any age, but to be 16 and to go through with a pregnancy and have that child and then absolutely adore that child and bring that child up brilliantly, it's testament to the type of human being that Julie is. And she said that her and Ashley just grew up together because, of course, she was young. She was a kid herself to some degree when she had Ashley. And even though Ashley's parents don't stay together, I mean, you're incredibly young at 16, it's very unlikely that you will remain together. Her mum then goes on to meet Rob Jones, and he met Ashley when she was 12 years of age and became her stepfather. Then, as a couple, they go on to have 2 children together. That means that Ashley gets 2 younger sisters who apparently absolutely adored her. I mean, I can completely understand why you would look at somebody like Ashley and think that you wanted to mimic her. She'd be a great role model, wouldn't she? Because of the way that she comes across. She just is just a very much glamorous individual. And as somebody who looks like they fell out of the car at speed every morning, I kind of admire women who know how to look after themselves like Ashley does. Now, on her father's side, Ashley went on to have a sister Yasmin and also a brother Lewis. But really sadly, Lewis was killed in 2015. And again, you just think, how much grief can families inhabit and survive? It's just horrible. She graduated from Liverpool, John Moores University in 2017, and she actually studied environmental health. She got that degree successfully. She also then went on to get a job as an environmental health officer. This was for Knowsley Council, and she was regarded exceptionally highly. And she'd actually recently been promoted. And we have to really think about what this speaks of where she is concerned. Because when I tell you about her partner, one of the things that you'll question is why she was with him. It will just be a natural thing that you will do, and it will make sense as to why you do. But we love people because of who they are to us. I think it's really challenging for any of us who can see, shall we say, red flags and see that in spite of those red flags, an individual that we cherish ends up in a relationship with somebody who may have a more problematic past and engagement with people that we might not wish for them to have an engagement with. But that's not how love happens, is it? You meet someone, let's be honest, for the most part, you meet someone and you fancy them. Then they're really nice to you. They're not really telling you about their subculture or the darkness that might have been a place in their life in the past. They're meeting you as you are meeting them with brand new eyes. And when you fall for somebody, it's really hard to cut that off down the line because maybe some of the things that they do, you do not respect. And what we're seeing on her side as a human being is this very articulate, very clever, very motivated, very well-regarded young woman. And we have to meet her on that level and not then pull her down reputationally because of some of the people that she knows. I think that's just so important. So she's doing really well. She was career driven. Her dad said that she was just so ambitious, so dedicated, and that she was someone who really from very early years knew what she wanted in life. She worked really hard to achieve it and she did really well when she achieved it. Her mum, well, she described her as the most glamorous person you would ever see. And she actually joked about the irony that she'd started jobbing the waste side of environmental health. And you can understand that because you look at her and you would not imagine that she would go into that kind of arena, the waste side of environmental health. You kind of look at her in a picture perfect front facing position, maybe marketing and PR. But actually, again, that speaks volumes about this woman's nature. She's multifaceted, she's multi-layered, as we all are. But like I said, you would have looked at her and thought, oh, she's going to be somewhere in the beauty or marketing or PR industry, and not that she's actually dealing with sewage, for example. Her dad said she was beautiful, intelligent, charismatic, family-orientated. I mean, I have to say, Manchester and Liverpool aren't far away. It's 40 minutes away. And whenever I go to Liverpool, the one thing I come away with is the population there are just unbelievably wonderful. It's one of those little pockets of perfect to some degree in the UK as far as personalities go. Yeah, there's an undercurrent of problematic behaviours. There are gang warfare issues. There are problems with crime and drugs. Of course, it goes without saying, it is a city. But there is just something about the average Liverpudlian that makes you feel really embraced, even if you're just on a day trip there. And there is this very family-orientated perception from the outside looking in of the area. And certainly it seems to play out in reality where families are concerned. They are very much embedded in one another's lives. It's important for them. I know it won't be for everyone, but like I said, that's certainly the vision that I have. I think it's a stereotype that plays out, and she certainly plays into that. Her family just adore her. Also, she was just loved by people that she hung out with. She had this really social, great life, and she was liked by literally everyone who came into contact with her. She apparently was a real festival girl. She loved going to festivals. Now, by 2022, Ashley is living on Leinster Road in Old Swan in Liverpool, and she's living with her boyfriend, Lee Harrison. Now, she'd been with Lee for about 5 years. She also had a miniature dachshund, Darla, and that dog is gorgeous, and she absolutely adored that dog. She was somebody with a capacity for great love in her life, whether that related to animals, children, or indeed her wider family. It's just part of her nature. Now, on August the 20th, 2022, it's just before midnight. So Ashley's in the pyjamas. She's alone in her home. She's just doing what we all do on an evening when we've not got anything on. She's just watching TV. Now, unbeknownst to Ashley, this is just before 11:40 p.m. of that evening. Two men pull up outside her house in a Hyundai. And then they get out and using a knife, they slash 3 of the tyres on Ashley's car, which is parked outside. Now, that in itself is a targeted hit, isn't it? They've decided that that is the car that belongs to the house or the household, and they want to do damage to it. There is a message in that, isn't there? And it really intrigues me because what we're going to talk about really in this case is an escalation from that point. I think to myself, okay, You have gone with this full intention to harass somebody, in this case by slashing somebody's tyres. You've not actually physically harmed the individual, but you're going to put them to a lot of trouble, and you're going to send them a clear message, which is somebody is deeply unhappy with you, enough to actually turn up at your home so they know where you live. Secondly, identify your vehicle so they know what you drive and they've been watching you, and then to actually physically damage your vehicle because they want to cause you some harm. It's psychological, it's physical because of the damage to the car, and it's also very much going to cost you money. So just having that going on in the back of your mind, if you discover it the next day, is going to be something that's going to cause you to question, why are they doing this? Particularly, as I said, because Ashley's not involved in any subculture or criminal area. She's just going to work every day and living her life and trying to be a good citizen. But what then plays into the mindsets of these individuals who've done this damage, drive off, and then decide to come back? What's going on that wasn't enough? What are they thinking of that makes them return? Now, bear in mind, she doesn't know at this moment in time that they've done that to her car. The car alarm does go off, but she's sat in her pajamas. She's a woman by herself. The likelihood is she's thinking to herself, because it was also raining very heavily outside, that she's not going to go outside to investigate, because on a safety level, that wouldn't make sense. And she's probably just thinking it'll be the weather that set off those car alarms. And she'd actually texted her boyfriend, Lee, and said that the dog had been scared. And then she said, now my car alarm's going off. Lee replies to her saying, ha 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 ha, you think you're in a horror movie? I mean, don't get me wrong, we've all been there, haven't we? I mean, particularly the ladies who are listening to me now. We've all been there, haven't we? We've heard a bang in the house. We've heard something going on outside, and we immediately think it's definitely going to be somebody like Ted Bundy, and this is how I'm going to end my life. That's the kind of thoughts that you have in that existential dread of the moment. And he's kind of playing on that, saying, you think you're in a horror movie. Then he does text her again. He says, are you okay? Alive? And she responded at 7 minutes past midnight saying, no, I'm dead. Now, of course, that's good old British sarcasm. It's just the interplay that you have with partners that you're close to, friends that you're close to, and you have a good giggle at those kind of text messages. But what's really upsetting is it's a haunting foreshadowing of the events that are going to occur literally just minutes later. Because as I said, those two men leave after doing that enormous amount of damage to the car, but they come back. At 12:30 a.m, they return. And one of them is now wearing a balaclava over his face. He then breaks into Ashley's house. He kicks down the front door. God, I have no idea how she will have dealt with that moment, the terror, the fear, the confusion, the chaos. Imagine having somebody literally knock your door down. I've been in that position. When I was in Australia, living over there for a period of time, I had a guy who lived downstairs who had schizophrenia, and he thought I had a brain sucking machine in my room, and he literally kicked the door in. And I was sat on the couch eating a very delicious beetroot sandwich at the time. I can remember that. It is stained into my conscience. And I can remember just ultimately that confusion. This isn't meant to happen. Your house is meant to be a sanctuary. No one's allowed in unless you invite them over the threshold, and yet here she is. He's kicking down the front door. Worse than that, he's armed with a Skorpion submachine gun. Now, it's hard to get weapons in the UK. It really is. You can get hold of some guns on the dark web, for example. Certainly, some people bring them in from overseas. But it's very difficult, even if you get a gun, to get the bullets. I've worked with undercover police officers. The bullets are the problem. So this individual having a Skorpion submachine gun with actual bullets in it, I mean, whoever this individual is, to some degree, they must be running with the big boys. He then enters the dining room. This is where Ashley was located, because like I said, she doesn't know what is happening in this moment. Everything must just be absolutely chaotic in her mind. She screams. She runs towards the kitchen. All she knows is she wants to get out. There's a guy coming to her home. She wants to escape. She tries to get out through the back door. But unfortunately, because obviously he's spraying bullets, she's struck in the abdomen with one of those 10 bullets that he fires towards her. And let's be clear, this guy's in a balaclava. He can see who's running. You know if it's a man, you know if it's a woman, and he's still letting those bullets spray everywhere. He then leaves this poor woman on the ground, bleeding out. He then goes upstairs, looking for Lee. So again, evidence that he 100% knows he has shot a female in this situation. Not the male that he's obviously intending to find. And he's just left her there. When he's unable to find clearly the intended target, he shoots 5 bullets into the bedroom wall over the bed before fleeing. And that's clearly a warning, isn't it? It's letting Lee know, if you'd been here, be your head this. But it is astonishing to me that he chased this terrified young woman through her house and shot her dead, all the while knowing what he was doing. Now, this causes some noise in the local area, of course it does, and even though most people don't know what bullets sound like when they're fired, it sounds like something that shouldn't be playing out. So a neighbour calls the police, he's heard the loud bangs, but then he looks over the fence and he sees Ashley lying on the floor outside, and he can also tell that she is groaning. So he can see that she's incapacitated for some reason. Other neighbours, they'd heard her scream for help. Again, imagine what Ashley was going through in those moments. When the officers arrive, they go through the house, they find Ashley in the back garden, she's unconscious, and it's very clear that she's got a serious gunshot wound to her torso. She's rushed to the hospital. Sadly, she doesn't make it. Also, there's this moment when the police officer finds her beautiful dog, and you can see the dog is terrified, and the police officer actually says, "What have you seen?" Because absolutely, the dog will have seen the person that dog loves and connects with more than anything in the world being brutalised and murdered. It's as simple as that.
Hello, mate. Hello, what's going on?
Now, investigators obviously have to inform her boyfriend, Lee Harrison, and her family. When they speak to him, he says he'd left the house at about 4:30 p.m. That was the last time that he'd seen Ashley, and he'd gone out that evening. He first went into a Ladbrokes, so he went betting, and then he'd gone into town. Also, he said that he'd spoken to Ashley on the phone. She said that there were rats in the garden. Also said that the dog was scared. And that evening, he'd gone out, had a drink, used drugs that night, including cocaine, and basically then taken a taxi with some of his friends to an address in Longview Heights. Now, on that particular journey with his mates, he passed Leinster Road, which is obviously where he lived with Ashley, and he did notice it had been cordoned off after the shooting. I find it really weird that he didn't go and investigate. I mean, maybe it's just me reading in too much to his actions in this moment, but if my partner was literally on a street where the police had blocked off that street because there'd been some kind of incident, I'd want to check on them. I'd want to make sure they were okay. But he doesn't do anything. He'd been with Ashley 5 years at this point. Also, he tells people that he loved Ashley, but when it comes down to this investigation, believe me, he was just highly unhelpful. And it bothers me. It bothers me greatly. Now, I appreciate that if you happen to be in the criminal underworld, we all know there is an expected code. You know, we recognise that snitching is something that can be deeply problematic for your survival. I get it. But I really struggle with people who are involved in that scene, who can see that their involvement with that scene has basically led to the execution of their partner, which has happened in this case. I can't understand why they still live by that rule. What does that mean about his mindset and motivation? It means that he cares more about his own life and survival than that of his partner who's actually been murdered. He's more concerned with being seen a certain way by a certain group of people, potentially in this underworld, in a way where they think that his reputation is being upheld because he's not speaking to the police, for example. But he's just betraying the woman who's died because of that potential association. I just cannot get my head around why he wouldn't be 100% forthcoming in this situation. He was reluctant to provide the names of even the friends he was out with on the night of his girlfriend's murder. I mean, that just makes no sense whatsoever. He also said he had no idea why he or Ashley would be targets, and he claimed that he didn't know who was responsible. He wouldn't give the police his mobile phone. First he said he'd lost it, then he provided officers with a burner phone. So he's just being absolutely deceptive in this moment. And again, people will understandably come to their own conclusions in this action. And most of you, I think, will think to yourselves, it's likely that he's got some criminal activity on his phone. He doesn't want the police to have it. He doesn't want the business to get wind of what he's doing. But in murder cases like this, they really just want to know who's done what. And I suppose that self-protective mechanism, again, speaks of an egocentricity within him, is more concerned about his own issues, his own needs and his friends' needs than actually aiding the investigation to help solve a murder involving his own partner. And I can't imagine how challenging that is for Ashley's family to know. She was with him for 5 years. Obviously, he will have had contact with a wider family, and they will probably be blindsided with him not getting involved in the way that he should. Also, he wouldn't agree to a recorded interview. Now, I get it. He isn't the person who's pulled the trigger. He isn't the person who's orchestrated a hit. He's not guilty of any of that. But to not even agree a recorded interview, and officers visited him at numerous occasions. He was described on those occasions as nonchalant and unhelpful and just basically refusing to engage on any level. So Ashley's life, what did it mean to him? I genuinely can't get my head around that. What did Ashley's life mean to him? I don't want somebody to be nonchalant about me when I die. I want them to be upset for a period of time, not too long, so it ruins their life. But you know what I mean? When I lost my dad, I was upset. I wasn't nonchalant. When I had to speak to CID, because my dad's death was a particularly traumatic death at his own hands, so you have to go through all of that in case somebody had bobbed into the garage and murdered him, as opposed to him taking his own life. You just are forthcoming, because actually all you care about is making sure you do your best in that moment. What is going on that is being nonchalant and unhelpful when we're talking about the death of this beautiful young woman? Now, Ashley's phone that was actually found just an arm's length away from her, so I think we can all imagine that scene. You know, she's been shot, she gets into the back, she's clutching it in her hand and she lets it go as she bleeds out. That actually did provide investigators with significant information as to why this had happened and also who may well indeed have been responsible. So she was worried. She was worried about what was going on, particularly with her partner. So she had sent voice notes to her friends, basically providing a running record of her concerns. There was a feud between two groups. These are grown men, by the way. It really bothers me when men cannot just resolve through words, genuinely. When reputation takes over sense, when consequence doesn't care about cost, it's bizarre. To get to a point where I end up talking about things like I'm talking about today, the escalation that's involved arriving at this point is to do with people who can't deal with feeling spurned. They can't deal with feeling humiliated. It speaks of a deep emotional immaturity that these kind of escalations occur and can ultimately lead to the death of a young woman. So she's telling her friends about this feud. So her boyfriend Lee and a group of friends, they saw some other young men at Glastonbury and the feud reignites essentially. So that had happened in the June. One of the men in the rival group had actually threatened to stab Lee whilst at the festival, which is obviously a deep threat. I mean, that's terrifying that somebody would be happy to say that. And the likelihood is they probably would have come good on that if they'd been given the opportunity. Ashley was really scared that the tension between the groups was going to come to a violent head, so she prophesied that possibility. And in one voice note, this is on August the 1st, she actually said to a friend, I don't want to have to go to Lee's funeral next, and I just have this bad feeling about everything. She said, my nerves are gone when I'm out in the car with Lee, just feeling like I'm looking over my shoulder all the time. She also told another friend that she told Lee to be honest about everything and that she needed to be prepared for the worst. She also said that she normally didn't want to know any of the stuff that was going on in his life, but she needed to know what's going to happen. So what we get there psychologically, insight-wise, is that she was not somebody who was involved in whatever Lee was involved in. She just didn't look in that direction. She didn't want to know. She didn't want to hear. She just wanted to get on with her life. She loved him. She didn't love what he did. Simple as that. And even though that puts her in a position of risk, and she understands that, she's more concerned about the impact that could occur regarding Lee. So she's more concerned about him being the potential victim. Little did she know that when she was talking about a funeral, she was realistically talking about her own. Now, the men involved in that feud, who apparently have this vendetta against Lee, was 41-year-old James Witham. I mean, 41 years of age, and you've got beef with somebody because you don't like the way they've treated you. I mean, again, like I said, emotional immaturity. Also, 29-year-old Joseph Piers, 26-year-old Niall Berry, and 28-year-old Sean Zeiss. So these are the guys who apparently have got an issue with Lee. We get to October the 9th, 2022. At this point, the car that the killers had driven to and from the scene of the murder is found with false number plates on a driveway in St. Helens. So clearly, wanting to make sure that the police don't find that car and believing that changing those number plates is going to work effectively. Now, by this point, they've already made multiple arrests. This is obviously directly in relation to the shooting. So Witham, he had acted as the gunman. He'd actually been the person responsible for killing Ashley. Piers, he was the getaway driver, but the hit had been organised apparently by Barry and Zeiss. So they were the ones who'd ordered the killing of Lee Harrison. So all of them are completely embedded in this attack. They planned it and executed it, and they're all equally culpable as far as I'm concerned. Yes, the person who pulls the trigger is the one that we identify as the actual killer, but it's a chain of causation that leads to that moment that has to be explored, analysed, and also criminally charged. And in this case, they are all equal as far as I'm concerned. Now, when the police speak to Lee about this, you would imagine he would be really angry, really devastated. Of course, because his partner of 5 years has been brutalised and murdered. But he basically said to the police that he can't believe that Barry was capable of killing Ashley, and also said this doesn't make any sense because, you know, our disagreement had taken place 3 years prior. So he's kind of defending the person who's responsible for this horrific action. And also, he wouldn't give any indication about why Ashley would have been killed. He didn't suggest that there was a reason why these men had an issue with her or with him. He just isn't somebody who's forthcoming with any of the information that the authorities require. On one visit from the police, he was actually in bed and he stayed there whilst the officers spoke to him. I get it. You know, at the end of the day, this guy doesn't respect the police. Let's just call it as it is. He doesn't respect the police, so he's not concerned about what they need and what they want, even though it affects him because his partner has been murdered. But like I said, it's more important for him to show his disregard and disrespect towards them than to actually think about doing what's right morally. Then on another visit, they found that he wasn't there. He'd left the country and gone to Dubai. I mean, when you lose someone unbelievably close to you through murder, what are you going to do apart from go to Dubai? I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it? When I lose people in my life, the first thing I think about is weekend break. Have a bit of a laugh somewhere foreign. Go out there and just get away from it all. Said no one with true grief ever. I'm sorry, I just find him really distasteful, and I feel that he's not acting in any way as we would expect him to act in such circumstances. Now we get to July 2023. Barry, Zeiss, Piers and Witham, they're charged at this point with Ashley's murder. Also, another man is brought into the picture, Joseph Fitzgibbon. Now, when Lee is told about the charges, he replies that, quote, they must have been off their heads on drugs when they did it. Okay, well, that makes sense then. I mean, even in that moment where the police are basically saying, not only clearly have they gone and slashed the tyres, which shows that they were able to do that, they were able to execute that particular plan, can't have been off their heads that much to be able to do that. They then returned to the home and upped the game by killing someone. That doesn't speak of people out of their mind on drugs. It speaks of people who have got into a situation where they feel justified in harming this innocent young woman and ideally him as well. But it's almost like he sees it as comical, isn't it? They must have been off their heads on drugs when they did it. He's giving them an excuse that wouldn't be their normal behaviour. That wouldn't be contextual with his experience of them. They've murdered his partner, and this is how he's speaking. He stated that he didn't believe they were responsible because he was fine with all of the men apart from one of them, but he wouldn't say apparently which one he wasn't on good terms with. So as far as he's concerned, he's only got an issue with one of the guys, so the others wouldn't get involved unless they were off their heads. Well, I don't know, maybe, Lee, it's just that you have a profound emotional deficit in your nature, which is why you don't read things correctly. You know, one guy out of the four guys they have a problem with you. Well, it must have been a big problem. And the alliance and allegiance of the other guys is clearly with that individual. So they must have seen whatever the issue is and been willing to side with that person. But he won't even tell, as I said, the police anything about this. He won't say, oh, this is a guy that I'm not on good terms with. So that would have been the trigger, shall we say. He also said to the officers that he was unhappy that he'd been named in the Liverpool Echo. The audacity of this man is just so far-reaching. He was unhappy that he'd been named in the Liverpool Echo. His partner was murdered. Of course he's going to be named in the local press. People usually would just show some sympathy and empathy towards you because they saw your name. But apparently, again, he's unhappy with that. He obviously likes to control the narrative and he's not getting to. Now, I know, by the way, that her partner is not responsible for this. I know that he didn't cause her death. But I'm just finding it really difficult to compute where he is on an emotional level, where Ashley's loss is concerned. I just don't feel that he's processing this in a way that's expected. I think she deserved so much more. So the trial itself begins in October 2023. At this point, the prosecution make it clear that as far as they're concerned, Lee Harrison had been the intended target of the attack. Witham, Zais, Barry, Pierce and Fitzgibbon, they all pled not guilty to the murder of Ashley and conspiracy to murder her boyfriend. It beggars belief, but we are used to this. This is very often the case in these very serious crimes. And what is devastating about this is Ashley's family will be dragged into the courts, basically, because they'll have to be present. They'll want to hear, they'll want to make sure that justice is served, but at the same time, they'll go through the absolute trauma of listening to some of the most brutal information that will play out in that courtroom. And also they have to deal with the defendants. And believe me, there are many cases where the defendants act so disrespectfully in these cases that in itself lends itself to another layer of trauma. Now, Witham, he did plead guilty to manslaughter. Let that sink in. The guy runs into a home with a machine gun, kills this poor woman after chasing her through the house, but apparently it's manslaughter. But he said that actually what he'd done was just fire some warning shots. He hadn't seen her, even though he literally ran into her very well lit home with bullets that seemingly chased her through the house to the back door. Now, I think we can all appreciate a warning shot would literally be in the room that he shot it in initially, which would be where she was watching TV. How on earth do those warning shots just move around doors and walls? They don't, do they? He chased her. He knew he was chasing her. And he executed her. She didn't have a hope. Also, a 26-year-old man named Callum Radford, he did plead not guilty to assisting an offender because apparently people said that he was the person who helped to store the car used on the night of the murder. It could be that Callum was just brought into it. He didn't really know what had played out. And by the time he'd agreed to do it, there was a problem because when it came out in the press and he realised it was associated with a murder, he probably didn't want to go and tell anyone about the fact that he'd done it, which is when the police find the car with those number plates that have been changed. So he's brought in probably as an accessory after the fact, but might not have really been involved at all with any knowledge around what had played out in this killing. Prosecutor Mr. Paul Graney, he said that the motive for the brutal execution was that Ashley and Lee had gone to Glastonbury Festival back in June of 2022. Zais, Barry, Witham and Fitzgibbon, they'd also attended. Also at the festival was another group of men who Lee was associated with. Now, one of those men was Jordan Thompson. During the festival, Zais was attacked by some men, and one of the men involved was Jordan Thompson. So the prosecutor Graney said, this attack appears to have occurred because Sean Zais was, as it was later expressed, arguing with everyone for Niall Barry. So to compound the loss of face for Sean Zais in the aftermath of the assault, his girlfriend, a young woman named Olivia McDowell, stayed with the group of which Jordan Thompson, Lee Harrison and Ashley Dale were part of. It is clear that Sean Zais felt deeply humiliated from what had happened at Glastonbury. Now, Barry, who already had a separate and long-standing antagonism towards Lee, sided with Zais in this fresh argument. Now, Barry used these new events at Glastonbury to reignite that old feud, and as tensions simmered in Liverpool, Niall Barry made a series of threats directed towards Lee Harrison. The old argument had apparently been regarding the theft of some drugs. So that's what the prosecutor says, and that's why the old wound, shall we say, had been reopened, and the thing that basically triggered what happened next. So the prosecutor said that on the night of the murder, Witham, along with peers who acted as the driver, were, as he put it, dispatched to kill Lee Harrison, and were also told, leave no witnesses. So obviously we know that Ashley was downstairs. Lee was not downstairs, he was out, but this individual probably thought he was upstairs, so he kills her before going upstairs to kill Lee. It was also said in court that they had been instructed to do this by Barry, Zais and Fitzgibbon. Now, that means that they were at a different place, but they were the ones being the puppet masters. So they all remained at a flat in Hoyton, and they were directing their operations from that flat. He also suggested to the court that Witham and Pearce had slashed Ashley's car tyres in an unsuccessful attempt to get Lee to come outside. Now, that might be the case. Obviously, because they've gone not guilty, the prosecution have to build a story, and this is the story that they're building. So they slashed those tyres, hoping Lee would come outside and they could kill him there. But when that doesn't happen, they come back undeterred around 50 minutes later. Greenie said this time they were not to be diverted from their intention to kill. So one of the men approached the front door of 40 Leinster Road, kicks it in. Ashley painfully becomes aware of what was happening. She screams, she flees towards the back door of the house, but the man enters the house, pursues her. He's armed with a machine gun. He opens fire. Ashley is struck, as we know, by a bullet. It passed through her abdomen, causing catastrophic damage. The court also heard how they found a voicemail from Ashley and Lee's phone. That call had actually gone through after she'd been shot. And even though the call connected, sadly at that point, Ashley was so incapacitated she couldn't even speak, and she didn't leave a discernible message. Now in court, Ian Fitzgibbon testified. So he said that on that night of Ashley's murder, he had indeed been with Barry and Zais at a flat. They were apparently watching a boxing match between Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk. However, he claimed that he didn't know of any conspiracy to kill Lee, which is interesting because you would imagine it would be a topic of conversation, you know? These guys are directing these people to kill this woman and this man, as in Lee and Ashley. He's just watching the boxing and there's no conversation about it. That boxing match was just so transfixing. He heard absolutely nothing. Then we have Joseph Pierce's mother. What can we say about Leslie McMahon? Well, I don't think she's the kind of person I'd like to have a coffee or a beer with. She said in court that her son had been home with her at the time. Said he brought her a cup of tea after arriving home just after 11 p.m. Now, that speaks volumes, literally speaks volumes about her nature. Prosecutor Greenie said that she had told the jury a pack of lies. And the reason for this is clearly he wasn't giving her a cup of tea. I don't deny that she probably loves her son. She probably wants the best for her son. She's afraid of what will happen to her son, so she just lies willingly for him. We're talking about the murder of a young woman. You have to let that loyalty go when your child is capable of being involved in such a treacherous activity. Prosecutor Greenie actually made it clear to the court that this was all lies, and CCTV from their home that was usually working fine apparently had been conveniently damaged and disposed of. She also had the audacity in court to say this: when you've got evidence to put before the court to call me a liar, you may call me that. Do you know what? With respect, I think anyone can call you whatever they fancy calling you. It's diabolical to me. There is this group of human beings in our world that just have no morals or ethics. It's family above everything else, no matter how diabolical the actions of your family may be. Now, the police investigator, Dave Rawson, he actually told the court how Lee Harrison, Ashley's partner, had been really uncooperative in aiding the investigation. And I think that's a really important point to note because at the end of the day, he's making it clear that some of the pieces of the jigsaw aren't completed because Lee wouldn't get involved or engaged in helping them as investigators. He said he just doesn't want to engage with the police. He doesn't want to help the police. He said he had no beef with these people and he can't believe it's about an argument from years ago. Oh, well, Lee, if you can't believe it's from an argument years ago that's led to the execution of your partner, then it mustn't be the way that it's played out in the court. It must just be for a whole other set of reasons that you're just completely oblivious to. I mean, just because you're in a scenario where you want to keep stum to keep your reputation intact, that is something I find deplorable on every single level. It's clearly about an argument from years ago, and they clearly had the intention to murder both you and your partner, and yet he just acts astonished and can't believe it. Can't believe it to such a degree that he's just rendered completely incapable of actually speaking to the police and doing anything positive to actually aid their investigation. We get to November the 20th. This is after a 7-week trial. Witham, Zayes, Barry and Piers were found guilty of Ashley's murder. Also guilty of conspiracy to possess a prohibited weapon and also conspiracy to kill Lee Harrison. Fitzgibbon, he was found not guilty of all those offences, and Radford was also found not guilty of assisting an offender. But this is really harrowing to process, because what we're talking about here is that Ashley herself knew her killers. She considered some of those men friends, and yet they were willing to plan and actually institute her murder. Just how devastating for her family to know that. We get to November the 22nd, 2023. At this point, the 4 men were sentenced to life in prison for Ashley's murder. Of course they were. It's the only sentence you can give when it's murder in the UK. Also another concurrent life sentence for conspiracy to murder Lee Harrison. I don't know why they don't do consecutive ones, so they just get it twice. But when it came down to the judge and the minimum terms, they did give what I would consider is a strong sentence compared to a lot of sentences that play out in the UK these days. Barry was given a minimum term of 47 years. Witham was given a minimum term of 43 years. Piers was given a minimum term of 41 years. And Zayes was given a minimum term of 42 years, which is a good outcome. Now, in the sentencing remarks, the judge said that the 5 bullets had been fired into the wall of the bedroom despite no one being there. And that was a clear statement that if Lee Harrison had also been there, of course, he would have been killed as well. However, he also commented that the fact that Lee had refused to cooperate in the police investigation into Ashley's murder was a cruel twist to the tragic loss. The judge said that he was so involved with criminal drug dealing gangs and that her boyfriend refused to assist the police to bring her killers to justice. Amen to that. He should be shamed in court. I know it won't bother him, but it bothers me. I want people to have Ashley's injustice put out there. Because, yeah, there was a massive injustice in her being murdered. That goes without saying. There's a huge injustice that people that she thought were her friends did it to her. But there's also a huge injustice that the man that she loved, the man that she trusted, has let her down so horrendously in this situation. Understandably, Ashley's family at that sentencing gave some very deep and impactful victim impact statements. I'm going to tell you short parts of this. Obviously, they're far longer in nature. Her adoring mother, Julie, said, at 3:45 a.m. on the 21st of August 2022, the day I not only lost my daughter, but my best friend. The night we got that dreaded knock that no parent or family should ever have to get. 2 police officers stood at my door, an image that will haunt me forever. Never did I think they would say these words. She's passed away, they said. My life might as well have ended there too. Those 3 little words had just turned my lights out forever. Time has since stood still. Myself and Bobby, in total shock and disbelief. Ashley's 2 younger sisters were sleeping peacefully in their beds upstairs. Then the reality set in that I was going to have to tell them their big sister that they so adored was no longer here. Those poor, innocent girls exposed to this horrific act. How can I tell them some evil person has done this to this defenseless sister who was home alone in a place of safety, a place where they regularly spent nights staying over? Another sound no mother should hear. The screams of my baby girls when I told them something awful had happened to their big sister and she passed away. The inconsolable cries of a 7 and 12-year-old whose lights had also just been switched off. The ongoing months of therapy needed to help my now 9-year-old process how and why this has happened. My 12-year-old forced to change school as she felt unable to return to her old one in fear of everyone knowing what's happened, not wanting to feel like she was in a fishbowl with all eyes on her. Never to spend another night staying over at their big sister's house being spoiled, or never getting to become aunties, a role that they both so look forward to. That night, I had to do the unthinkable. Again, something no mum should ever have to do. I identified my beautiful, sweet baby girl in a mortuary, lying there, lifeless behind a glass screen, unable to touch, hold, or smell her. My beautiful, perfect girl was now a piece of evidence. The weeks went by and the unthinkable things continued, choosing a coffin for my 28-year-old daughter, brochures left behind like I was choosing a piece of furniture or shopping for an outfit for her to wear while she lay dead alone in a funeral home. How has this happened? 2 weeks before, we toasted a promotion over Sunday lunch. Ashley was so excited to start a new role. We were all so proud of her achievements. Seeing her graduate was one of the proudest moments of my life. But now, the plans she had for life have been robbed for an utterly senseless crime. I hate that I won't see her get married, have children, and deliver her babies, become Nanny Julie, or grow old together like we always joked about. Often being mistaken for sisters, we were only 16 years apart. Trying to fill that void as we spoke every day, sharing everything. We don't get to spend another Christmas with her, harassing me to put a tree up, walking in on Christmas Day looking like a supermodel asking, when's dinner ready? And I look like I've been dragged through a hedge sweating over the stove. We should have been celebrating a 30th birthday this year, a milestone we all look so forward to. I don't feel safe in my own home, fearful something terrible will happen to me or my family. My once rational mind is very irrational now. I am scared when a car drives past or an unexpected visitor knocks at the door. I can't sleep, and when I do, I wake and the reality of this nightmare hits me, and Ashley dies over and over again. I take medication I never imagined myself needing just to get me through the day. Months of counselling to help process this, but what can anyone say or do to make me feel better? She also said to the killers, I hope you all understand that I will never, ever forgive you for the life sentence you've given to me and my family. People speak about justice for Ashley, but in my eyes, there will never be justice. The only justice is that this would never have happened. Although I can now rest knowing that you monsters are going to pay for what you've done to me and my family, and that you've ruined your own lives and your family's lives, I hope my words haunt you all forever. You, James Witham, I hope when you go to sleep at night, you see my baby girl's face as I do every single night. For my Ash, my baby girl, forever 28. I love you. I miss you. Until we meet again. Ashley's father, Steve Dunn, he described how he'd been confined to a living nightmare and how history had repeated itself with her death. He said, my son, Lewis Dunn, had been shot dead 7 years previously. At only 16 years of age. He was shot at close range in the back with a shotgun in a case of mistaken identity. An innocent victim getting caught in the middle of a gang feud. It had been a long 7 years of pulling myself out of some very dark and at times lonely places, trying to put my life back together. He commented that after life was seeming positive again, he was, as he says, instantly put back to day one. After the murder of his eldest daughter. He said he couldn't be prouder of Ashley. He said she loved her food, and when we'd go out for family meals, it was nearly always Ashley's choice, but we were in good hands. Ashley had good taste. Ashley had a very active social life. She was liked by everyone, so getting a time slot on Ashley's busy schedule could usually be guaranteed by an offer of some nice tapas or by cooking her a nice meal. Her favourite was steak, roast potatoes, broccoli, peas and mushrooms. That was what she'd most often asked me to cook. And we would sit, talk, catch up for hours. I cherished every single second I spent with her. Because of the callous and cruel actions of those responsible, I'll never ever get to have a family meal with Ashley again. Despite this, as we saw on CCTV during the trial, Mr. Witham considered it acceptable to take Ashley's life away, take all that from her, from me, all of her family, before spending time dining with his own young son just 2 days after murdering her. I am now sitting with my one remaining child, having put through all the trauma of yet another trial, listening to those verdicts being read out in relation to Ashley's murder. I have lost another child, a victim of big egos, running around the city with powerful guns, involved in petty feuds and killing innocent people. From day one of the trial, I have not seen one single shred of remorse from any of the defendants. In fact, quite the opposite. I have felt throughout this trial, often during breaks in court procedure, that they all have behaved disrespectfully towards myself and other members of Ashley's family. Throughout the course of the trial, they have not acknowledged our pain, apologised, or shown any understanding of the impact of what they've done. They're only sorry that they got caught. From what I've observed throughout the course of this trial, I do not believe they will change anytime soon, if ever. By failing to admit responsibility, they have forced us to sit through the harrowing ordeal of yet another trial. They have consistently lied to try to avoid being punished for their actions. They are clearly dangerous individuals, able and willing to deploy the most dangerous of automatic weapons to settle petty disputes, without any concern at all for those caught up in the crossfire. No family should have to go through what we've gone through. These men cannot be allowed to do this to anyone else. Kath Cummings, Detective Chief Inspector, said, "The actions of James Witham on that day had a devastating and widespread impact. Ashley, an innocent woman, lost her life in the most brutal way at the hands of Witham. That was compounded by the fact she was alone in her own home, where she should have felt safe, where she was fatally shot instead. Her family have to live with that knowledge every day. The 4 men who've been found guilty have not shown 1 ounce of remorse for their actions, which led to Ashley's death, and instead pleaded not guilty, forcing a family to endure a lengthy trial where they have had to relive Ashley's last moments over and over again." It's so true. What was said by the family and also by the officer here. You are hearing about this brutal attack on this woman, and in spite of all the evidence making it clear these men were 100% guilty, none of them has shown any concern. Those victim impact statements bring in Ashley to the room. The mother who just misses her daughter endlessly. The father who is burying his 2nd child. He only has 3. You can't even begin to conceive of that, can you? His 16-year-old son was caught in crossfire, mistaken identity, murdered. And now his daughter has met the same fate. I don't even know how you can survive that. It's worth noting that when she died, all of her friends at work also got together because they wanted her to be remembered endlessly. They actually got a bench at Court Hay Park so that people basically can remember her every time they sit on that bench. And on the 1st year anniversary of her death, they actually organised the Hoyton Railway Bridge to be a little pink, orange and green in her memory. She left a big mark, not only in her family's life, but also in anyone who met her's life. She was just one of those incredible women. In February 2024, interestingly, Ian Fitzgibbon, that alleged 29-year-old who was acquitted, he was arrested just 3 months after that. 3 months. So it was as part of Operation Venetic. It's a British investigation into the EncroChat criminal encrypted communications network. And it was found that Fitzgibbon had conspired to supply large quantities of drugs, including cocaine. When the police actually arrived at his flat on Linnet Lane, he literally threw his mobile phone out of a window, but it ended up landing close to an officer who'd seen him throwing it. Calm as a bitch, right? Calm as a bitch. And when he was questioned about his criminal activities, guess what? He didn't give them many answers, but he did shout his mouth off. He said that he was Billy Big Bollocks. I mean, I kid you not. Is he in some kind of really bad sitcom? Billy Big Bollocks? I'm Billy Big Bollocks. Oh yeah? Well, crack on, sweetheart. He was then charged with conspiracy to supply cocaine and heroin and for possessing criminal property. He did plead guilty because he couldn't have done anything else. And Judge Andrew Menery said this: "Your offending came to light as a result of law enforcement agencies accessing the EncroChat messaging platform. Through diligent police work, you were linked to the username VimptoHawk, an attribution which you've already accepted." The judge also went on to state that Fitzgibbon was operating his own line of drugs and dealing with drugs, and therefore had a leading role in providing drugs to customers around the country. In addition, the messages supported the conclusion that he was an absolute operative in the Country Lines type operation from Liverpool. The judge talked about how he was sourcing large quantities of drugs from a supplier in London. He had a driver, he had a car that was specifically adapted to make it possible. So it's very clear that this was a guy who was getting bigger in the drugs underworld. And they actually showed that he was directly involved in the supply of at least 19.6 kilograms of cocaine and 21.3 kilograms of heroin, which is just short of 40 kilograms of Class A drugs. And that in itself is absolutely shocking, isn't it? So he was sentenced to 14 and a half years in prison. His defense spoke on his behalf and said that he'd recently had a child 2 months prior to his arrest, and that apparently that had made him determined to change for his family and his daughter. He also wrote a letter to the judge expressing his regret for his actions. The cynical side of my nature says he was just hoping it would mean he got a lesser sentence. But as we say, if you ain't prepared to do the time, don't get involved in the crime. You made your choices. Don't get me wrong, it is very sad that that child of his will grow up with a father in prison. But like I said, he made his choices. Now, on February the 21st, 2025, Lee Harrison, Ashley's partner, guess what? He gets sentenced to 5 years in prison for conspiracy to supply heroin and crack cocaine. He'd actually been using a telephone line known as the Kyle line to supply drugs. And in court, he was literally described as a career drug dealer. It's very obvious these are clearly terrible men. They are terrible human beings, all of them. It is such a shame that Ashley met Lee. She would be alive if she hadn't met him. It's such a shame that she obviously had quite an accepting nature and just didn't want to look in the direction of the reality that her partner was involved in these awful scenarios. She just wanted to hope that she would be okay and hope their life would be okay. She cared more about him than she even did about her own needs. She was concerned about his well-being, not her own. And to rub salt in the wound to her loved ones, he didn't seem to care less. And at the end of the day, some of the blame for her death lies at his door. Simple as that. He will know why Ashley was killed. He will know that his dodgy lifestyle, his terrible decisions were the reason that she died. And rather than being eaten up with regret or guilt, he just denied all knowledge and refused to help the investigation. It speaks volumes as the kind of person he is. Now, although he was the intended victim, his behaviours ensured that no one has any sympathy for him. I don't. I'm certain that prison is absolutely the best place for him. Too judgmental, guys? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you feel that maybe I should be more compassionate towards Lee? Or do you come down on the side that in this case, he shows the emotional bandwidth of a small rock? Let me know your thoughts. And if you've got this far and you found this case interesting, please do subscribe, give me a like, give me a hype. It helps me a great deal and it means that I can keep making this content. My thoughts go out to Ashley's family. What an amazing woman, executed in her own home. The place that she should have felt safest. Look after yourselves. Be safe. See you again next time.